Dinosaur, written by Stephen Llewelyn and performed by Chris Barrie. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell to keep up to date with the latest installments.
Chapter 5. The New World Order. 3 weeks earlier, and 99.2 million years later. Patagonia. The old man watched the rain clouds move in over his forest. There was a storm coming. It was almost as if the weather was tracking his mood. He was incandescent, but as ever, he served his fury cold.
"How dare they disrupt my plans?"
he scathed in silence, alone in his study.
2 years of planning, and they changed the rotor just before launch. Someone has tipped them off, and when I find that someone, I will ensure that it takes them 2 agonizing years to die.
He quirked a sickly smile, pleased with the sentence he contemplated. Now he just needed to find an offender to whom he could apply it. Getting out of his seat, he turned his back on the storm outside and began to pace.
"This can be no coincidence,"
he muttered, shaking his head. After a few passes, he stopped suddenly in his tracks.
"Yes, her. It has to be. Some misguided revenge for the necessary purification I ordered. She forced me to order. Yes, Elizabeth, of course."
He strode purposefully back to his seat, sending out a call for his aide.
"How can I help you, sir?"
Her response was prompt as always.
"Has Lieutenant Hemmings left for her special assignment with the fleet yet?"
"Yes, sir. 3 days ago, sir."
"I want her recalled, right now."
"I'll get on to our contacts in the Middle East immediately, sir. But if she has already taken her station, she will have gone deep undercover and will observe the comms blackout you ordered, sir."
"Then don't waste any more time."
"Yes, sir."
The comm link closed, and the old man stood once more in front of the huge, curved window which filled an entire wall of his study. He clasped his hands behind his back and glared out over his private remnant of the rainforest. Just moments later, the intercom beeped again. He waved a hand over the arm of his seat to answer it.
"Yes,"
he snapped peremptorily.
"I'm sorry, sir, but she's already taken her post and will no longer be contactable."
The aide's anxiety was obvious.
"I'm very sorry, sir." "Sir?"
Taking a deep breath, he forced his rage to subside. He couldn't afford distractions now.
"Sir?"
the aide asked again.
"Do we have the new Mars mission personnel lists yet?"
He spoke very slowly, enunciating every syllable as though he had a grudge against them.
"I'll check, sir. Please stand by."
30 seconds passed.
"Yes, sir. The information has just been received by our contact at NASA. I'm sending it to your terminal now, sir."
He sat and spun the chair to face his desk. A keyboard glowed to life within the surface, and a screen rose from the back of the desk automatically. He glanced down the list quickly, scanning to see if it contained any assets he could use.
"Is there anything else I can do for you, sir?"
"Yes. Send a secure copy to my granddaughter, and tell her I need to see her straight away, tomorrow at the latest."
"Of course, sir."
He cut the link. Still glowering over the new list, he slammed his fist down on the desk.
"Damn!"
Surrey, England. The tube ran under almost all of Britain, even offshore. Jim Miller's wealth, derived from successful businesses in the chemicals industry, provided gold-class travel permits for his family. Rose Miller was about to make her usual tube journey home from school, her gold card placing her in a queue very much shorter than the one endured by most. The endless lines of unnotables who spent much of their leisure time travelling between work and sleep each day watched morosely as she and her immaculately turned-out friends boarded their car. High-speed tube cars made the journey to her stop virtually instantaneous. She said goodbye to her classmates and disembarked. The platform was at the end of her street in Surrey, just a short walk from her family home. Trains stopped every few minutes, continually disgorging drove upon drove of masked strangers, all eager to step back into a controlled environment where the recycled air was filtered and they would be safe from the violent unpredictability of the weather. Rose was no exception, and she left the busy station quickly. The overwhelming majority of people now lived in the giant concrete cubes which covered most of the world's landmass not given over to industry or industrial agriculture, each packed with hundreds of housing cells. By contrast, Rose's family owned a 1995 three-bed semi-detached house. Built over a century ago in the old-fashioned street layouts, the property came with a garage, front and rear gardens, fully landscaped with synthetic lawns and plants, and was about as decadent upper middle class as it was possible to get in 2112. The white picket gate opened automatically for her, and she dragged her feet to the front door. The heads-up display inside her latest model lilac Lady Breathe smog mask automatically called up a retina scan as she neared the building. With a sharp look down and left, she confirmed the action, and a small hatch opened in the door for her thumbprint. Her personal comm, linked via the mask, provided her code to their home security system, and the door swung open. She stepped in and blinked through the menus to disable the poisonous gases app as the door closed behind her. "Welcome home, Rose," said a friendly, enthusiastic voice. She rolled her eyes as she removed her smog mask. That stupid application on the house computer needed deleting. It was so cheesy and she hated it. Not only did it log when she was late back, it also announced her arrival when she was late back. One of the boys in her class had already disabled his for those exact reasons. She sloped off to her room, making a note to ask him how he did it in the morning. It was a warm, stifling evening in July, which promised to be no different from so many others. But when Rose's father returned from the office looking pensive a few hours later, she sensed possibilities. He brought with him, to his mind, the nuts and bolts for a very different future for them all. Just how different, he had not the faintest idea at that point. Unusually subdued throughout dinner, he eventually raised the subject of the Mars mission with his family. He explained how the threat of terrorism had forced a personnel reshuffle close to the deadline, leading to new positions becoming available. Rose had the feeling of a wave curling overhead, almost feeling the need to duck before it crashed. Lara did not seem particularly interested, and so, risking chronic indigestion, Jim dropped his bombshell at the table. "Because of my background in advanced chemistry, NASA have offered me, us really, a place on the Mars mission. It came in a couple of months ago, but I wasn't sure how to... it's a big decision. And now time's caught us up, and... He tailed off. Fearing the sudden pregnant pause might birth a monster, he quickly plunged into further explanation of the socio-political situation behind the reasoning for the changes. Unfortunately, this passed Rose by as she zoned out, struck almost insensible by the thought of leaving everything behind. Her favourite dessert went virtually untouched as Jim confessed his hopes, dreams and concerns to his family. After his words ran out, there remained only the smell of warm chocolate in the air for a long moment. During the course of the row which followed, Lara rejected the idea out of hand at volume. Jim was a man petrified of his wife's displeasure, had been for as long as Rose could remember. He usually just agreed with Lara, that he was very lucky to be able to afford her, and once again it seemed his latest big plan had not begun well for him. Rose's shock at her father's announcement ebbed slightly, leaving her with mixed feelings about the prospect offered. She wasn't sure, but it felt like something new was stirring within her. A chance for adventure, perhaps. Her life had always seemed as if drawn along a golden thread, but this, terraforming, space travel, who knew where this could lead her? Lara was naturally mortified.
Lara, darling, Jim placated, we'll be giving birth to a new planet, a new world. Not to mention we'll be well and truly in the history books.
It didn't seem to be working for him, at least not at first. Lara's response was blunt.
Who ever heard of anyone who mattered being in history books? Who even reads that stuff anymore? And how can I stay fashionable on Mars? Really, Jim, you're such an idiot. You just tell them to keep their job in whatever it is, or I'm leaving you.
Rose always cringed when her mother trotted out that tired old line. However, the devil inside her always wondered whether the same trick might actually work for her one day. She had mixed feelings about that too. Would she want a man who always caved in? It usually worked on Dad, though. Even as she was considering it, this time proved no exception.
Okay, sweetheart, I'll refuse it tomorrow.
Ha! See that you do! The opportunity to join the Mars program may have ended right there for the Millers, but for an unexpected change in their fortunes, triggered by Lara's night out with her friend Barbara. 3 weeks later, Jim walked along the corridor leading to his family's suite of rooms within the life pod, pondering whether Barbara, a woman that for his wife's sake he had sincerely tried not to loathe, had not turned out to be the best friend he had ever had. She had nudged Lara into making the decision he wanted, and in the process cut herself off from Jim's life altogether. He felt excited, happy even. Of course, intellectually, he understood that they were lost millions of years in the past and faced a disconnected and very uncertain future. But these were abstractions, so important that they didn't really matter. In the right here and right now, all he knew was that these people needed him, and he had a purpose. His old life had been full of people who wanted things from him, certainly, but if not him, then they would have surely got those things from someone else. Not so here. Suddenly he felt alive, and couldn't wait to see his family, to hold them and tell them how great that felt. Keying his access code, he walked into their apartment whistling cheerfully, but was forced to duck as a flying cup exploded against the door, closing quietly behind him. The hello died on his lips.
I can't believe you got us lost on the other side of the universe,
Lara Miller screamed at her husband.
What?
He tried.
Don't give me that,
Lara snapped.
But you told me we'd be in the history books. Famous, you said,
she continued, throwing a small makeup bag at him, which, after a clumsy juggle, he was able to catch.
Who will ever hear about us now?
Well,
don't try and get out of it,
she bellowed.
I want to go home. It seems like forever since I saw a shop.
It was only 4 days ago.
And I want to know what you're going to do about getting us back. What?
Nothing, darling. Look, we haven't moved across the universe, Jim tried gently. We've been thrown back in time.
What difference does it make? Don't try and confuse me with your scientific gibberish. I want to go back to Earth right now.
Jim opened his mouth and closed it again, deciding on a different tack.
We'll be back on Earth very soon, sweetheart. Any day now, he tried.
Promise? Promise. Jim was a man who firmly believed in clearing one hurdle at a time as far as his wife was concerned. Lara seemed to calm a little.
I knew I shouldn't have let you talk me into this.
But you called me from your club with Barbara and insisted that we accept. The volcano erupted again.
Don't you dare blame me for this!
No, darling, I wouldn't. Of course you're right.
I wish you'd come on your own, so that you could be lost in space or time or whatever, and I could have stayed with my friends, the people who really cared about me. You've never cared about me,
she snapped again. The usual waterworks came on cue, and Jim fell for it, like always. He tried to comfort the centre of his world, which only led to another overreaction. Lara stormed out of the room, and Jim was about to run after her, following in the well-rehearsed steps to the familiar dance, when Rose caught her father by the arm. "Dad, please stay and talk with me," she said.
"I will, sweetheart, as soon as I've made sure your mum is okay,"
he answered, but Rose refused to let go.
"She is okay, Dad. Don't go after her. It doesn't do any good. She's been working herself up to this all day. I knew you were going to get it when you got back."
Rose gave her father a sideways look. You know she's bonkers, right?
Eh?
Was Jim's lightning riposte. He stopped trying to pull away, noticing something different about his daughter, something about the way she was scrutinizing him.
Now, sweetheart,
he said at last, sitting down next to her and trying to pull himself together. That's no way to talk about Mum. So, what did you want to talk about? He looked nervously at the door through which his wife had departed, clearly desperate to run after her. Rose's brow furrowed. Dad, I've been thinking, after everything that's happened, and the fact that most people are saying there's no way back for us, well, everything's changed, and I've realized that I'm worthless here.
Darling,
Jim comforted.
Of course you're not worthless.
No, Dad. In a very real sense, I am. I have no skills to help me, or anyone with what's coming next.
She shook her head sadly.
I don't know what to do.
Her voice shook and she gulped tearfully.
When I was at school, everyone wanted to fit in with me because I was rich and pretty and popular. None of that matters anymore. The other kids on the mission all seemed to be really clever and making friends, but all I could think to do was write down how I was going to brag about what we're doing to the people back at home.
Her tears came in earnest now, and Jim moved to hold his daughter in his arms. There, it's okay. You'll always be the most important person in the world to me, he assured her.
No,
she said, pushing him away slightly.
You've always given me the daddy's little princess speech and let me get away with everything for as long as I can remember, and now I'm useless. Like her!
She pointed at the door through which her mother had departed. Jim was speechless. He had never seen this before.
You've always done everything for us, Dad,
she continued, hammering her points home.
You let us spend all your money without ever getting cross, no matter how much we yelled at you or took you for granted, and now...
Temporarily out of words, she sniffed and wiped her eyes.
We need to change. I need you to teach me, please.
Jim sat back, taking a deep breath.
I never wanted to get cross with either of you because you're everything to me,
he said with bewilderment.
Have I somehow done you harm?
Without meaning to, I think you have.
Rose sniffed again.
And your kindness has ruined Lara.
That's Mum, sweetie.
Huh, when it suits her. Did you know she makes me call her Lara when we're out shopping so that people, particularly the men, think we're sisters? Or used to, I should say.
Jim looked a little discomforted.
Well, we all like to feel young and attractive.
No, Dad, stop it. Stop making excuses for her. You remember when we voted for the councillors? She voted for the captain and that Gleason man who stopped the bomb going off because she thinks he's a hunk and so brave. The final vote she cast for some other bloke who was giving her the glad eye when we were in embarkation. I asked her why she didn't vote for you, Dad, and do you know what she said?
Jim shook his head, looking crestfallen.
She said, and I quote, "Oh, I didn't think about him, silly me."
Well, it was a shock,
he replied in a small voice.
I'm sure your mum was as confused and upset as the rest of us, and it probably just didn't occur to her.
He tailed off, all too aware of how pathetic this sounded.
Dad, she didn't think about you, the man who does everything for her and always has. Well, it's all changed now, and this family needs a shake-up. We need you, Dad. You're the only one of us who is worth anything to these people, and I need you to teach me. Is there someone you know through your contacts who can train me on how to do things? Outsidey type things? She finished hopefully.
Jim smiled. Her courage added an ache to the sorrow he was feeling inside.
Well, I'm sure one of Major White's security people will be able to teach you a thing or two about survival outdoors. And I understand that Captain Gleason is something of a master at bushcraft, as well as being a hunk,
he muttered sourly.
However, I would suggest you start by making friends with young Tim Norris, Dr. Norris's son. He's a little shy, or at least seems so, with us old-timers. I reckon he'd be glad of a friend in you. Tim knows a great deal about this period of Earth's history. I'm sure he'd be delighted to tell you all about it, although I doubt he's had much attention from girls, and certainly not ones as pretty as you, so go easy on him."
This brought a smile to Rose's face, and Jim held his daughter close to hide the hurt in his eyes.
"I love you, Rosie."
I love you too, Daddy.
Lieutenant Jeff Lloyd looked up sharply as Commander Jill Baines strode into the brig. Nodding to the security operative guarding their prisoner, she walked to the center of the room and stood directly in front of the bars to Lloyd's cell.
"It's about time," he bit out. "I demand to be let out of here immediately."
"Let the wind out of it, Lloyd," she retorted. "You're going to answer some questions about the murder of Mario Bacchini."
"I already told Douglas I don't know anything about that,"
he answered crossly. "That's Captain Douglas to you. Or have you decided you like it in here or something?" she asked with ill humor. Lloyd seethed in silence. "We now have incriminating evidence back from the bomb site putting you in the frame, Lieutenant. I want you to tell me why you tried to destroy your own ship, your colleagues, and all of these innocent people."
"Colleagues?" Lloyd mocked. "You haven't got a shred of evidence against me for any of this."
"Why would you say that?" asked Baines, her face a mask of puzzlement. "I have a full file of evidence in my hand, and you're already in jail. You're an engineer. Surely you can bolt those two circumstances together and make them run." Lloyd looked uncertain for an instant, and then smiled nastily.
"You're just bluffing. Never kid a kidder, Commander."
Baines pulled up a chair and sat down, thumbing through the file. "Firstly," she said casually, "perhaps you can explain to me why your DNA was found on the wormhole drive mountings, or what was left of them."
"Engineer?" Lloyd answered in a sarcastically questioning sing-song voice. "I don't doubt that I've touched everything in engineering at some point."
"Yes," continued Baines, unperturbed. "But can you explain why only your DNA was found on the remnant fixings and none of Mr. Bacchini's? He was, after all, the man in charge of the wormhole drive, was he not? Despite what the explosion did to him, he left not a trace on what little remains of the drive chassis. Odd that, don't you think?" Lloyd sat back.
"No idea. Please do enlighten me," he said, crossing his legs and making himself comfortable.
Disgust settled on the commander's face as she leaned forward. "We know well how fastidious Mario was in the cleaning of his equipment. If anyone so much as left a coffee cup in the WHD room, they would be in danger of having it bounced off the back of their head. So it almost looks like you were the very last person to touch the drive before it exploded? Even the man who was murdered hadn't touched it before it blew," she stated, again with affected puzzlement. Her expression hardened. "You'd better start cooperating, or things might get very bad very quickly for you," she added menacingly. "A brilliant and kind young man has been brutally murdered, and I think you know something about it."
"Brilliant, huh?"
Lloyd scoffed.
"He was just a mediocrity like the rest of this crew. No great loss."
"There are a few things you need to know, Jeff," she spat his name.
"Like what?"
he sneered. "Like the fact that the law you think will protect you and pander to your every little tantrum and whim is all gone," she confided with satisfaction.
"What are you talking about?"
The commander smiled again. "That bomb, the one you can't remember anything about, has sent us all back 99.2 million years into the past. That's right. Let that sink in."
"You're raving, woman,"
he snapped arrogantly. "When we get back to Earth in a few days, you may find yourself cast out and alone in a world full of flesh-eating monsters if you don't start talking pretty sharpish."
"You wouldn't dare!"
Lloyd shouted, getting to his feet.
"I know my rights. You can't do anything to me without a fair trial, and there is no death penalty, so don't try and scare me with your ridiculous stories."
Baines merely smiled as she leaned back in her seat, taking her ease in response to Lloyd's obvious distress. Lloyd sat once more.
"I don't believe you," he mumbled sulkily. "It's just one more conspiracy to get me out of the way. Everyone knows I'm the most competent and experienced officer on this crew. If it wasn't for all the nepotism and playing golf with people like us that everybody does at NASA, I'd be captain of the New World, and I'd run things properly, I can tell you. Then you'd see a new world order."
Baines continued to smile. Unfazed, she ignored his outburst. "No more law, nor trials, nor due process. If I don't like what you tell me, you're out. And there's more." She leaned forward again, grinning savagely. "I've been swatting up on Middle Cretaceous South America, which is where we're going to have to put down, by the way, thanks to you. As I understand it, an adult Giganotosaurus or Maposaurus could easily swallow a man whole, but please don't let that scare you too badly. I have it on very good authority that the smaller predators are likely to be even more dangerous to us. They can apparently run at speeds of up to 70 or 80 kilometers per hour, and have serrated teeth and terrible killing claws on each foot." She shook her head with mocking sadness. "Oh, I doubt they will give much consideration to your rights, Jeff."
"I've told you I don't know anything,"
he repeated brittly. "Okay, let's leave the scene of the crime for a minute. Tell me why you were hanging around the escape pods when everyone else was either in embarkation or at their stations. See if you can remember anything about that," Baines asked sarcastically.
"I've already told Doug, the captain. I was asked by Nasaki to run some checks."
"Those checks were for the day before," she interjected disdainfully. "You had no reason to be there. No legitimate duty, at least." She gave him a hard stare. "You set the first bomb to stop the ship, creating havoc, so you could make your escape via a lifeboat just before the second bomb went off in the pod reactor core. What was your plan, huh? Get home after a few days' discomfort, looking a bit disheveled, and then go bleating to everyone about the tragedy you'd miraculously survived? What next? Get pensioned out on compassionate grounds due to the terrible trauma you'd suffered? And finally, of course, you're free to collect a fat payment for your handiwork from some terrorist organization or other soon after. How am I doing so far?" Lloyd looked away.
"You haven't got a scrap of evidence to support any of that."
He rounded on her once more, adding,
"And if I was trying to escape and blow the ship up, why didn't I have the detonator on me then, eh?"
He sat back, a victorious grin on his face. Baines placed her elbow on the arm of the chair and rested her chin upon the back of her hand, scrutinizing him. Eventually she asked, "Who said anything about a detonator?"
Dinosaur, written by Stephen Llewelyn and performed by Chris Barrie. New installments uploaded each week. Subscribe for more. Visit the link in the description for free New World companion stories, available for download as ebooks.